Can you believe this? I can quite easily. Britain has the most illegal migrants of any other European country. Listen to this figure.
Everyone. So it's not funny, but you sort of have to laugh because you can't work out how we've got here. Everyone in 100 person in this country is here illegally, according to Oxford University research.
So that means at least one out there is illegal. I know which one we're going to kick out.
But if you think about, like, any high school with 1,000 kids in it, you know, 100 of them are... No, hang on, don't call...
Don't
10
do
of them...
maths.
Sorry, I'm sorry, I'm terrible at maths. 10 of them, stay educated. 10 of them will be here illegally and 1,000 people in a school.
It is a point. How did we get in this situation? Well, let's ask our next guest, who is the former head of the UK Border Force, Tony Smith. Tony Smith, much of this must have happened on your watch. It's all your fault, Tony. Sorry to blame you.
Of course it is, Andrew. Of course it's my fault. Yeah, these figures are quite old, actually. I've been digging around a bit since you called me. These are 2017 figures. You speak to Migration Watch, are probably the best informed on UK figures. It's probably about double that now, actually.
Oh, God.
It's probably about... Yeah, because we think it's going up about 70,000 a year since 2017, if you take into account the ones we don't know about, that we estimate that don't come to Home Office. But I mean, I think probably, you know, the more informed commentators would tell you it's probably about 1.5 million people may well be in this country illegally. I mean, when we say illegally, they may have entered illegally, of course, but they are now in this position where they've claimed permission to stay from the Home Office and they're in a backlog. So, you know, they're not necessarily sort of immediately removable. But yeah, it is a quite high number, I think, compared with other countries. Yeah, definitely.
Tony, I can remember when Boris Johnson was Mayor of London, one of his ideas was to give an amnesty to illegal migrants, and I think the figure was 500,000 in London.
Yeah.
Outrageous. We want to kick them out.
We're not good at these things. I mean, if you look at the EU settlement scheme, you know, after Brexit, you know, Europeans were allowed to stay. The estimate, there were 3 million here. Actually, about 7 million in the end applied under EU settlement to stay. So we're not really good because we don't have a biometric entry-exit system in this country. We don't actually check people in and check people out like they do in the States. The EU are starting that next month with the entry-exit scheme. So we do check people in, and even then, Andrew, you know, people coming through e-gates, we let lots of nationalities through the e-gate, which can't ask you any questions, doesn't assess your...
You know what, Tony? They'll find a way. They'll find a way. You can have a biometric system at the airport, but they're not coming on the airplanes anyway, so they'll still find a way to get round any sort of biometric system that we all then get enslaved to. But the crooks will always find a way.
But Tony, anyway, the new Labour government's going to smash the gang, so that's all right.
We can all sleep safe at night. We've got to go. We've run out of time, Tony. I'm so sorry. Tony Smith there, former head of the UK Border Force. A leading imam has described the relations between Jews and Muslims in this country as both fragile and fractured amid the ongoing conflict in the Middle East.
This comes on the day the world remembers the Hamas October 7th attack on Israel. So what can be done to ensure all communities feel safe in Britain?
Well, we're joined now by the Deputy Chair of the Conservative Muslim Forum, Naveed Asghar, and reporter at the Jewish Chronicle, Josh Kaplan. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. It's really great to bring you both together this morning to talk about this. Let's start with you, Naveed. How can we bring communities together in this country when the situation is so febrile?
Hi, Beth. Absolutely. You know, we need to keep working and having dialogue with each other. We live here in the United Kingdom, and we understand that the scenes that we see on television, social media, etc., are very harrowing. There's no doubt about that. But we live here in the United Kingdom, and we must keep dialogue open. Yes, it's been 1 year, and I totally agree that, you know, when Hamas went over the border and killed those teenagers at a festival, they did not ask their population that can we go and do this. They did not negotiate with their regional Muslim partners and countries to say we're going to do this. I don't think anybody in their living memory would ever have, you know, agreed to something like that. Until this day, there's still hostages outstanding. The first and foremost thing they need to do is return these hostages, and I'm sure that's where, you know, the stop will come from Israel, and our international partners will then negotiate a ceasefire and stop the killing that's going on. Yes, absolutely. Look, I'm not going to deny that Israel has bombed the living daylights out of Gaza. It's going to take decades to, you know, to rebuild that country. But we need to get the hostages back. There's no doubt about that.
Josh, what about what's happening here? On Saturday, there was a big march in central London again, and lots of photographs of people with banners and placards supporting Hamas, a terrorist organisation, supporting Hezbollah, and it appears the police turned a blind eye. We go back to this idea of two-tier policing, and I know many Jewish people feel it would be unsafe to walk into central London on a Saturday when these marches take place. That's never going to be able to solve community. We're never going to get community cohesion while that's carrying on.
No, I agree with you. And I think it's about coming from a point of shared values, right? Like, we need to be able to say that some things are unequivocally bad and they should be condemned. And I think that would include, for me, and I think for a lot of other people, supporting a prescribed terrorist organization like Hamas or Hezbollah. But it's the sort of thing you see week in, week out on the streets of London. You see people that put swastikas on Israeli flags. You see people that make like grotesque caricatures of Israel's leaders. And, you know, I'm not saying for a second here that people shouldn't be able to exercise their free speech, but I think we will not get community cohesion. We will not get a sense that all communities are respected if we don't agree on a set of things that we think are beyond the pale and things that we think are acceptable.
Can we go back to you, Naveed? I mean, we know that Jewish people are fearful. Do you say Islamophobia has risen since what happened in October the 7th in this country?
Absolutely. Look, anti-Semitic attacks have risen vastly. Islamophobic attacks have risen drastically. And that is the last thing we want of communities living here in the United Kingdom. Everybody has a right to protest peacefully. And, you know, everybody should have a right to be able to go out freely in the street and exercise those rights. Nobody should feel under pressure or of the fear of attack from anybody else within our communities. You know, we live in the United Kingdom, which is a free and fair society. And we've been given those rights because a lot of countries, for example, in the Middle East, Africa, etc., you're not allowed to protest. If you protest, the armed forces, the police, etc., come down on you really, really hard unless, you know, the government authorises it. So the fact that we have those facilities available in the UK, we should take them at face value and let everybody protest. Now, look, I might not agree with your opinions, you might not agree with mine. We might have opinions, political differences, we might have religious differences, but absolutely they must be peaceful and everybody should be allowed to protest.
I think what maybe we're missing the part of this story is the fact that these tensions wouldn't boil over in the way that they currently do if we had been better at integrating different cultures and religions for not just the last 12 months, but frankly for the last 20 years. Because I think that's to some degree what's come home to roost here, Josh. Have we worked hard enough, do you think, to encourage communities to assimilate with each other so that when events happen in the Middle East, we all come together under a British identity, regardless of really where you were born or what your religion is?
I mean, I think if you look at the scenes from the last year, especially in London, I think you'll have to say that that's been a bit of a failure. I think there are people in this country that care so deeply about a conflict that's 5,000 miles away, that doesn't really concern them, that doesn't really have any personal impact on their lives. And I, for one, I can't really understand it. You know, my family's Israeli. My sister, until very recently, was in the IDF. I have a very personal connection to this. What I can't understand is why people who have been born and raised in the UK are willing to, you know, go out on the streets and get arrested and assault police officers in the name of ideas that frankly have nothing to do with them.
And what about, Naveed, this shocking survey today showing so many young people in this country are sympathetic to Hamas, which is a terrorist organisation which wants to eradicate Israel from the face of the earth, and also thinks that what happened on October 7th has been exaggerated. Just very disturbing.
It is disturbing, and I think a lot of issues come down this to education, and most of the education is happening from TikTok, from YouTube, through WhatsApp messages, and it's you know, and the narrative is being put through by people who call themselves leaders of the Muslim faith here in Britain, when they actually don't represent a majority of the moderate British people who actually just want to get on with their life and carry on. And yes, of course, when issues happen around the world and people are being killed, innocent people are being killed, and it doesn't stop, then of course people do get aggrieved with that. But I think we need to be much better at educating our youngsters and ensuring that they don't actually get into the clutch of these extremists who are trying to, you know, portray a different narrative and trying to get people behind them. Essentially, a lot of people are doing this. You know, there's a lot of TikTokers wanting to create their own brands, their own, you know, their own money bank. They're trying to enrich themselves off of this war. I see it in local communities all the time. It's virtually got to a stage where if you you, if you're not with them, you're actually against them. So I often speak out and try to be a voice of reason, and I often get a lot of pushback for my views when I say, look, there's two sides to a story. They don't want to listen to the other side of the story. They only have one narrative, and they want to keep going on that. In regards to integration, look, a lot of work has been done over the last decades, and it has worked, and I think a lot more work needs done. I think this, the boom of the internet, and everyone's got mobile phones in their hand when the information is so fast and steady, and there's no fact checking of information that comes through these mediums, and young children, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, have got this access 24/7. So we really need to look at a wider a society. We need to look at a much more wider way of how we deal with this. It's not just one issue that will resolve this. And if we don't look at it now, there's 3.9 million Muslims in the UK. Are we going to have this sort of situation every time something happens on the other side of the world?
Quite.
I think the government needs to look at this, and it disturbs local communities as well. It's not. So it's a very few, by the way, it shout the loudest. And cause the most upset, but then the moderate people have to either fall in line or go silent, and they don't have the voice or opinion or the strength to actually speak out.
OK, thank you, gentlemen. Really interesting. Deputy Chair of the Conservative Muslim Forum there, Naveed Asghar, and reporter at the Jewish Chronicle, Josh Kaplan. Thank you both.